You like that, right?
Beat.
Drop the beat now. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I didn't have to say it again. Said it one time.
Always
Thank
a
you. Yeah, we're excited, aren't we? Welcome to the February Board of Education meeting, the State Board of Education of the state of Georgia. And at this time, I would ask Miss Lisa Kennemore if she would lead us in an invocation and introduce our speaker for inspiration today.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So glad you made it here today. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful day. Let us pray. Scott, you have reserved seats in the back.
Yes. It's church. Go to the back, Scott.
Good morning. Welcome, Janet. It's good to see you. Let us pray. Lord God, we just thank you for this beautiful day you've given us to be about the people's business, especially the children of the state of Georgia. Thank you, Lord, for life, health, and strength. Thank you for everyone that's here and attending and all of those who are watching online or listening. Lord, we just ask you to just guard our hearts and mind that we may be focused on what is right and good for the children across this state. May you touch the heart, mind, and spirit of our leaders, Lord, from the federal down to the state, down to the local municipality, that they may also be mindful of what is good and what is perfect in your sight for our children. They are our next generation, and as we take care of them, Lord, we know that we will be blessed in today and in the future. Bless our inspiration speaker today, Lord, as he prepares to give us words of inspiration. And bless each one of us as we leave this place, that we may find ourselves safely back at our homes. And Lord, continue to be with us and give us the opportunity to just show the love of Jesus to everyone we see and meet. In Christ's name I pray, amen.
Amen.
Our inspiration speaker today is Dr. Grant Rivera. He has been the proud superintendent, and I repeat that, the proud superintendent of Marietta City Schools since 2016, leading the district's 12 schools, approximately 8,900 students, 1,200 employees. He is a career educator who has served in principal, teacher, and coach positions prior to becoming superintendent. Dr. Rivera believes great schools are built on the combined strength of supported families, talented educators, and an engaged community. He holds a bachelor's degree in education and social policy from Northwestern University and earned a master's degree in special education and a doctorate of education with an emphasis on school law from the University of Alabama. Dr. Rivera serves as a board member of multiple education-focused organizations, and he is actively engaged raising funds and awareness of pediatric cancer. Please welcome Dr. Grant Rivera.
Thank you so very much. I am truly honored to be here with you this morning, and I thank you, ma'am, for the invitation. It's interesting. I've had the chance to stand here before, and we talked about assessment. And just recently, in the last week or so, I had the chance to sit before a joint Senate Education Committee to talk about literacy. And I was thinking about all of the times where I've been humbled enough to stand before esteemed colleagues such as yourself. And then I think about, and I counted 19 different graduation commencement addresses that I've done. Never have I had the opportunity so humbling as this. And I mean that with all sincerity. Because here I get to stand before you and say thank you. Thank you as one of your educators. Thank you for the work that you do. And I thought, among all the opportunities that I've had to be in front of you here and be in front of others there, I've never felt so honored to stand in front of this group to acknowledge the work that you're doing. You see, we've been for decades in this work in education, and certainly coming out of the last several years in a pandemic, I would argue for every single one of us in this room, the work has never been harder. And yet the work has never been more important. And I think about the challenges that we have, and I think about learning loss, and I think about wraparound services, and I think about children and families and policy. And I say to all of you, thank you for the vision that you set. You give me, as a father, as a superintendent, as a member of the state, hope. And to you, to State Board of Education, and also to you, State Superintendent Woods, this humbling opportunity, not to stand before you and talk about assessment or literacy, but to talk about the hope and the gratitude that I have for each of you in this room, but to you, State Superintendent, and to you and your staff. When I think about the times when you, just like this board, have risen to the moment to inspire, to support, to encourage, I think about your report last year and the hardest of times ever to hire educators, and you took the initiative to lead a conversation with every leader in this district around teacher retention. That gives me hope. And to everyone else in this room who joins us as advocates and supporters in education, not just the state board, not just the state superintendent, but certainly his staff and every one of you here, I feel as if I have the humbling opportunity now, today, more than ever before, to stand on your shoulders. You give me hope. You give me encouragement. You give everyone in this state support. And I think about the over 1.6 million children that we all serve together. I couldn't be more confident and more grateful to follow your lead and your vision. So this morning I stand before you in the most humbling of moments that I've ever had in my professional and personal career and just say thank you for the work that you're doing. It's noticed. It matters. We stand on your shoulders. We feel you at our back as we do the work and carry out the vision that you have established, every single one of you in this room. And I leave you with a moment that I have as a father every day. And I hope in some ways it reminds you of how we look to you and are grateful for you every day. So I have a first and a fourth grader. Sometimes my evenings are filled with my own board meetings, like last night. But one of the things that my wife and I know that I never compromise on is the morning carpool line. Every morning I do morning carpool line. And I pile my kids in the car. Sometimes we're eating breakfast on the way to school. But as we pull into the carpool line, I have the exact same conversation with them every single morning. And I ask them 4 questions, and then I make a statement. And I say to them, to my little first grader, Reese, as she loads up her backpack and gives Daddy a kiss, I ask these 4 questions. I say, who's brave? She goes, me. And I say, who's strong? She goes, me. I say, who's kind? Me. And I asked her the last question, and I said, who's helpful? She goes, me. And then as she goes out the door, I say the exact same thing to her every morning. I said, Reese, be a leader. And I do the same thing for my 4th grader. For all that you do in this room, every one of you, whether your seat is here or your seat is there, thank you for being strong, kind, helpful. Thank you for being brave in the hardest of moments as we lead 1.6 million children. And above all else, as I stand before you in an opportunity I will probably never have again, I will say to you, thank you for being a leader. We are all better because every single one of you in this room is here. And it applies to my first grader the same way it applies to every single one of you. Thank you for being a leader in this state because you empower every one of us in your respective role. And this morning, my heart is full. My hope is high because you are a leader. Thank you so very much.
Joining us today. We would be honored if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, sir. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you again for joining us for your words of inspiration. We appreciate what you do for the students. Again, good morning, and want to give a shout out to some special guests that we have joining us today. And we'll go down the list. We've got Matthew Smith from Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education. We've got J.D. Harden from Cognia, Joe Cash from Mountain Ed, Steve Bartlett from Mountain Ed, Larry Darnell from Educators First, Megan Swingle from Decoding Dyslexia, Tina Ingberg from Decoding Dyslexia, Dr. Claire Buck from GACES, Brent Rivera from Marietta City, we just heard from, Justin Pauly from GSBA, and Dana Rickman from Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education. And I believe I left some people off of the list. And Ms. Kennemore, are there some people sitting out in the audience that perhaps I forgot to mention? Some special guests that have joined us who are not board members, but have joined us today. Is there anyone sitting out there in TV land?
As I look
I don't
across
see
the
anybody.
great land,
I don't know.
I see two in the back who I think, everybody agree with me, deserve a little appreciation.
Yeah.
Well, it's me again. And today we have two special board members. They're still board members in my heart. Mike Long and Scott Johnson. And we just want to let them know how much they are appreciated and the work that they've done for the children across the state of Georgia. I'm going to call them up one at a time. I was going to do Scott first, but Scott wanted me to do Mike first. So I need paper, scissors, rock to see who wins. Is that okay? Okay, I'm gonna do Mike first. Okay, Mike Long, he came on the board a few months after I did. He came in dancing and flailing and everything, and I didn't know what to make of it. Barbara Hampton was the board chair at the time, and she said, "Oh Lord, I'm glad I'm rolling off." And Helen inherited Mike. Little did we know Mike would bring so much life, livelihood, and love to this board. He has a heart for the children across the state, and when he was the chair of state schools, all of the kids, especially at GAB, when he came up, they just completely just lit up when they heard his voice. Because Mike would go down there, he danced with the kids, he interacted with the kids, not just there, but also AASD and GSD. And he is my inspiration as I lead the state schools. So I would like for everyone to welcome Mikey Mike to stand as he gives his parting words.
That was good, Lisa. You set me up on that one, didn't you? So, yeah, that's funny. Y'all probably think I've got a lot of stuff to say and some jokes to crack and all the rest of it. I can go with the dance. But I think, this morning on the way up the elevator, I realized something. I said, there's no real humor in what we do. What we do is very serious. We've had some good times doing it. We've had two great board retreats in my area. I cannot thank you guys enough for coming into my area and just enjoying the different geographics and demographics of Georgia. I will tell you that I had two great people in my area, Greg Jacobs and Richard Smith, that helped me with the RESAs. I guess you guys need to stay involved with the RESAs. Make sure you do that. And, the words that kept coming this morning, I said, okay, I got this one. Well, funny. No, I just want to challenge you. Challenge you to put the kids before your egos. Put the kids before your own politics. Put the kids first. If you do that, everything's going to be fine. And that's, I had 8 years, believe it or not. It's hard to believe we've been that long. Richard, been a good friend, buddy. I appreciate you. The board has changed, but that's a good thing. Sometimes paradigm shifts are necessary, and I did not want to roll off, but I did. And Nick Ellis is a fantastic human being and a good friend from back home, so I look forward to him serving in the future. But guys, I want you to challenge you to remember what's first. You're right. I can still walk in there today and those kids light up. And that's important. So be involved in your areas, be involved in your districts, be involved in your RESAs, be involved in the kids' lives. 1.6 million is too many to touch all at once, but if you touch one at a time, guys, one at a time, that's all that matters. Thank you very much.
Our next board member that we are going to bid farewell is Scott Johnson. Curtis Scott Johnson. I didn't know that was his first name. Yeah. So I appreciate Scott. I've known Scott through many different organizations, but one thing I have to really admire about him is his wife, Janet. She gives him 150% support, and I just absolutely love her. He's not just a board member, but he, and as well as Mike Long, they have become lifelong friends to me. Scott has a passion for the military, and so do I. Mike has a son in the military. I have a son in the military. I have to let everybody know I was the first one to skydive with Golden Knights, and they followed me. Yeah, it was a good job. So I'd just like for everybody to just welcome Scott Johnson, Mr. Traveler Extraordinaire. You see his pictures all across the U.S.
I didn't know I was getting walk-up music. Thank you, Lisa, and it's humbling. It was humbling the day I arrived in this room and saw a nameplate with my name on it, and it's humbling to be here today, and to be able to, after 10 years, say, farewell in an official capacity, but never farewell to my fellow board members of this department, and the education community that I've been honored to be part of. And I am honored because this is an unusual occasion to have my wife Janet here in this room. You all met her, retreats and that sort of thing, but Janet, thank you for being here today, and thank you for your support. I know that in 2012, late 2012, Governor Deal was out supporting, trumping up support for the charter school amendment, and I ran into him at a breakfast in Marietta, and he, out of the blue, I just said, "Hey, Gov, how you doing?" Like we always would do at these political breakfasts. He said, "Hey, I've got something I want you to do," and I said, "Yes, sir." That's what you say when the governor says, "I got something I want you to do," and I said, "Yes, sir." And it was several weeks, and actually about a month later, and I found out, hey, call came in and said, "Governor wants you to serve on the State Board of Education." And I said, "Really?" Because I want you to know, I don't know how you felt, but I certainly felt underqualified. I'm not going to say unqualified, but certainly underqualified to sit where so many people have sat in this room and behind this desk and in these chairs. Then I, recently thought, and even then thought about Nehemiah. I know you all have often probably read that. He wasn't a builder. Did you know that? He never built anything. And yet, in the inspiration of the Lord, he said, "I'm going to go build that wall, and I'm going to get a lot of help doing it." And I couldn't have done it without a lot of help over the last 10 years. I couldn't have done it without my fellow board members, all of you, but especially some of the ones, especially those I can call out a few who were here when I got here and have outlasted me. But couldn't have done it without the wise leader, the wise counsel of Mike Royal, and
Words don't usually go together.
because he was here when I got here, and the advice, because she's an education professional, unlike me, of Helen Rice. And the many phone calls that you answered and I answered and we shared. So thank you for those. Who else was here when I got Kenneth Mason? Kenneth, maybe he's watching, but he's not here with us today. But his wise guidance and the prayers of Lisa, of course, who we came about the same time. Let me tell you that My second board meeting was 14 hours long. Y'all probably heard me tell that story about 14 hours. It was really a hearing for a school district about whether they should some of the board members should remain in place. And yet I came back, and so did many of you. And then the wise counsel of other folks. Two superintendents, Superintendent Barge, who was when I got here, and Superintendent Woods. And thank you so much for your help and your guidance. And Governor Deal and his staff, Governor Kemp and his staff. It was just my pleasure to interact with all of those folks. And wise people that so many of you know, but I had lunch last week with Dr. Gary McGivney, and I really think that his guidance was a whole lot of what I've experienced and had the honor to do this last 10 years. So I just want to tell you another reference from Nehemiah is that those walls they built in those walled cities in those days, they would swap off because you couldn't. One person or one group or certainly one individual couldn't guard the wall all the time. So somebody had to be on duty, and then somebody had to relieve them, and they got relief to go do something else and swap back and forth. And so to the new members, Nick, it was great to meet you last night. And I'm swapping off, but you guys are swapping on. And that's what it's all about. Those of you that are still here, you'll always have my greatest respect, and I will honor you. Those members of this staff, folks that I have met and worked with, it's been my pleasure, my honor. But I'm going to do something else, as Mike. But I know we'll stay involved, and it's an honor to have been here, and it's an honor to stand before you and say thanks. So, God bless.
We'd all like to take pictures with you.
Everybody.
Here's your crystal apple.
Do you think a crystal apple?
Odds years of bad, but then you can do all that. I'm gonna get back. Have that tall person. Gotta get behind somebody. Right
Did he get everybody in this picture? I like it when you call me Big Papa.
If you can, turn slightly to your side and then scrunch in as much as possible.
Is that a joke? Can I say something?
All right, here we go. And 3, 2, 1. Another batch. 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Hey, I was thinking before the deck was built.
Friends before we got here, and friends before along that.
I'm already up. That's it. How did you do that?
That's right, that's the way of the world.
It's gone.
Way of the world. Just until we see each other again.
Speaking of.
We'll see you around.
Know each other before this and then.
That's the truth. I think I know a few places you're gonna be.
Yeah, you get it out one last time.
Hey, Ben, Nick's on dance, you gotta take up the
I'll see you
dances.
soon, I'm sure.
It's not pretty, but I know.
Gosh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Lisa.
Lisa,
And
that
Mike,
was fun.
Scott, we thank you
Everybody.
all so much, and we're glad that we could honor you, and we will miss you, but don't be strangers. You know how to get up here, and so we hope to see you again in the future. We will now move on to our public hearings. We have 2 state board rules. We have, first on the agenda is State Board Rule 160-5-6-.01, statewide school nutrition program adoption, and no one has signed in to speak on this rule, so the hearing for this rule is closed at this time. Item number 2 is State Board Rule 160-4-2-.34, which is the adoption of the dual enrollment, and no one has signed up for the public hearing for this rule. So that public hearing and the public hearing for both rules is closed at this time. We will now begin to build our consent agenda, and I will turn to Mr. Matt Donaldson for any budget committee items that we have.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee met yesterday and advanced items 1 through 10 to the consent agenda.
Items 1 through 10 from Budget Committee will be moved to the consent agenda. Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. This time I will turn to Ms. Finnepetti and items from the Rules Committee.
Yes, Chairman Downey, items number 1 and number 2 will both be pulled for separate votes. Items 3 through 7 will be moved to the consent agenda.
Okay.
And just for some item of information, which is under items for information, the number 1 rule 160-4-4-.10. There are 2 typos in that rule. It is a non-substantive change. It's just 2 typos in there, so they are correcting those, but that's just for information, so everyone knows.
Okay, very good, thank you. So we will pull items 1 and 2 from rules for separate votes, and then 3 through 7 will go to the consent agenda.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sweeney, I will turn to you for district flexibility and charter school committee items.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are 2 items on the agenda for the District Charter and Flexibility Committee, and both items are suggested to move to the consent agenda.
Great. Items 1 and 2 will move to consent. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Benton, do we have any matters that need to be placed on the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we got 4 items that I recommend we move to the consent agenda. The individual student waivers, the minutes of the January 11, 2023 executive session, the minutes of the January 2023 state board meeting, the February 2023 personnel report, and the February 2023 legal report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Benton, I appreciate that. Mr. Royal and Ms. Kennemore, I do not believe we had any items from state schools or from audits this month to place on the consent agenda, is that correct?
No items, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Are there any other items that we have overlooked or omitted that need to be placed on the consent agenda at this time? All right, we will take a 10-minute recess to build the consent agenda itself. We will come back at 9:45 and resume our meeting. And so we will be in recess until that time.
Excellent. About you? Playing some hunts. Oh, yeah?
board members, you have before you a consent agenda, actually an agenda with a consent agenda, and I will entertain motions related to such from Mr. Scott Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a motion that we approve the agenda.
All right, motion to approve the agenda by Mr. Sweeney. Do I have a second? Second from Ms. Petty. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. Mr. Sweeney?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. Mr. Sweeney, do I have a second?
Second.
I have multiple seconds. I'll give it to Mr. Donaldson. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, consent agenda passes. We have 2 items that have been pulled for separate vote under Rules Committee. We have item number 1, FBO, State Board Rule 160-5-6-.01, the statewide school nutrition program. We had a public hearing. There were no speakers. I will entertain a motion for adoption at this time.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. Do I have a second? I have a second for Mr. Dr. DeJarnik, excuse me. Doctor. I don't want to short for Stan. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. And now we have item number 2, CTAE, amendment to State Board Rule 160-4-2-.34, the dual enrollment adoption. Again, we had a public hearing today. No one signed up for that. I will entertain a motion to adopt at this time.
Motion to
approve.
From Ms. Kennemore. Do I have a
Second.
second? From Mr. Donaldson. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. All right, at this time, we will turn to the superintendent's report.
Nothing to report.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, I appreciate that. At this time, in the chair's report, we have some guests that are with us today, and I'm gonna turn out there to TV land, and let's see, Caroline, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me? and
Yes,
see me?
we can. I'm gonna introduce you, and I appreciate you joining us all the way from Chicago today. As many of you know, we are involved in NASB, which is the National Association of State Boards of Education. And we were asked to and applied for a grant through the Healthy Schools Facility Network. And some of us attended a training session where we are one of, it's us, it's Washington DC, it's Guam, and it's some of our partners from, I believe, Indiana and Ohio that are participating in the Healthy Schools Facility Network. And what we're hoping to do is to invite some of our partners to come and speak to board members so that our board members can hopefully take information, and you'll hear about some of this information, out to our boards of control at the REISs, to our superintendents, to our local boards, so they can understand some of the opportunities that are out there for them to better their schools, better the school environments through the Healthy Schools Network. And one of the ways, of course, that we've talked about, and we're still sort of evolving our plan, is through grant monies that are out there. And there's a lot of grant monies that are out there that these schools really don't know about. We want to make sure they know. But Caroline is here from Chicago. She is with Elevate, which is a nonprofit headquartered in Chicago that works on environmental health and energy efficiency projects in homes and buildings, including schools. And Caroline leads Elevate's water program, which works to ensure everyone has access to safe, clean, and affordable drinking water. And she also serves as a technical advisor for the National Association of State Board of Education's Healthy School Facilities Network. And Caroline was one of our trainers and speakers in our training session back in October, and we got to meet her then, and we appreciate her joining us today. Caroline, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me here today. And just quick check for everyone. Can you see a whole slide that says Healthy Schools for Healthy Kids?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. I'm glad it's working. So again, it's such a pleasure to be here this morning, and thank you to everyone in the room today for all the great work that you're doing in Georgia. And as you mentioned, I am here today to discuss the importance of healthy school buildings and how they can really help support student health and growth. I think that's one of the most important things about our conversation today. To really guide our conversation today, I do want to kick things off by introducing you a little bit more to that Healthy School Facilities Network that was just discussed and which we're so proud that Georgia is participating in. From there, I'm going to introduce you to some of the environmental health challenges that school buildings face across our country and how that really impacts student and teacher health. From there, I'll introduce you to a framework for healthy schools and then some of the environmental health issues and opportunities for schools. And then we'll wrap up with a conversation on some of the suggested actions for Georgia in terms of tackling environmental health challenges in Georgia schools. So that's kind of the roadmap that we have planned for our conversation today. And again, so proud that Georgia is one of only a handful of states that was selected to participate in the Healthy School Facility Network that the National Association of State Boards of Education is facilitating. And so as part of that network, states like Georgia, they receive a small grant to participate in the network. And they're really engaged in work that's aimed at increasing access to healthy school buildings that are free from environmental harms. And part of this work includes raising awareness about opportunities to improve student health and academic success through targeting environmental health initiatives in schools. So this conversation that we're having today is really stemming from that great work that Georgia's doing as part of the Healthy School Facility Network. So as many of you in the room today are probably already aware, many school facilities across our nation are old and they're in need of urgent repair. Actually, the average age of a school building across the country is 50 years old, and half of public school districts need to update or replace school building systems. And our nation's school buildings are in such disrepair that the American Society of Civil Engineers gave our school buildings a D+ grade in 2022. So given the sheer amount of time that a child spends in a school over their academic lifetime, improving the conditions of our schools is really an incredible opportunity for improving student health, safety, and academic performance. So what environmental health challenges are our schools facing? And really, what does that mean for student health and learning? And as you can see from the box on the left of this slide, schools face a wide range of challenges that can be indoor air pollution, asbestos, poor water quality, and extreme temperatures is another one. And these conditions can lead to increases in conditions such as asthma, high blood pressure, headaches, stress, along with challenges to mental and physical health. And these conditions really impact a student's ability to think and learn, which will impact their performance in and out of the classroom. One health challenge that is of particular concern for children and teachers is asthma. In fact, 14 million school days are missed each year due to asthma, and teachers have the highest proportion of work-related asthma cases for non-industrial workers in our country. So addressing indoor environmental conditions such as poor air quality, dust mites, pests, and molds can really help with some of the asthma triggers that we're seeing for students and teachers. So the next thing that I want to introduce you to is this foundations of a healthy school building. So in 2016, a group of researchers at Harvard, they released this framework, and it's called the 9 Foundations of a Healthy Building. And what this framework does is it distills 30 years of scientific research on building health, and it comes up with these 9 building factors that really influence health and academic performance. And you can see that here on the screen. These factors, they range from air quality and thermal health to noise and lighting. And I want to share this with you today because it may be a really valuable tool for Georgia to consider as you evaluate the health of the school facilities across your state. And so at this point, what I want to do now is focus on 2 core components of these foundations for a healthy school building and give you some thoughts and ideas on how you can actually support and tackle some of these challenges. So the first one is air quality. This is one of the key foundations of a healthy school building. You know, when students don't have access to good air quality, it can trigger some of those conditions like asthma and allergies. So to ensure children have access to good air quality, the EPA has actually developed something called an Indoor Air Quality Management Plan Toolkit. And what this does is it helps schools, students, teachers, and facility management staff identify and remediate poor air quality. And this is often done through low-cost or no-cost actions. And these plans they've really shown great success in school districts across the country in reducing asthma levels. You can see that Omaha and Hartford, they've actually tracked and seen significant reduction in asthma cases. Unfortunately, what we found is that only half of all schools in the country have an indoor air quality management plan in place. So we do encourage you to share information about this air quality management plan, and you can access this information. You can see the link here on this slide. It's epa.gov/IAQ-schools. So encourage you to get the word out about this toolkit, as it can really help schools across your state provide healthy indoor air quality for schools. Another foundational element of building health is water quality. So lead in drinking water is one factor that can challenge access to safe and clean drinking water in a school building. And tackling lead is incredibly important because exposure to lead can damage a child's developing brain and nervous system, and this can last with them for an entire lifetime. We're really glad to see that Georgia currently offers free lead and water testing for child cares and schools. However, I do want to point out we've only seen 38 schools complete testing through that voluntary effort, and 22 of those 38 schools have shown lead in their water at 15 parts per billion or higher, which is an EPA action level. And so we do encourage Georgia to consider mandatory testing and mitigation requirements for schools. The state of Oregon actually transitioned from a voluntary to a mandatory testing program and saw a significant uptick in testing across the state. I also recognize that a lot of times there's fear with making requirements mandatory if there's not funding for mitigation. So to actually help the schools pay for reducing lead in drinking water if they do find it. So I did want to flag for you all today the federal allotments that are going to states to offer free lead testing programs. It's actually being enabled now that you can use those dollars for mitigation in schools as well. So you can do the testing and the mitigation with that pot of funding that's coming to your state. So that's one great opportunity. And then EPA also has separate grants available for lead and water mitigation, and you can also use ARPA funding to mitigate sources of lead. So I did want to flag that as an opportunity for you all today. Before I wrap up our conversation today, I do want to just share some general thoughts on how Georgia can continue to really push the needle on improving school building health. And so we encourage you to host roundtable discussions with stakeholders on school facility plans across your state. These conversations can really illuminate some of the challenges that schools are facing and some best practices for environmental quality in your schools. We also encourage you to share the results of facility assessment plans publicly and to really promote transparency on how elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds are being used. There's another great network that you can get involved in, the Green Ribbon Schools and Green Strides networks. They have a wealth of information, resources, and grant information for creating safe and healthy and energy efficient schools. So that's a really great resource for you all. And then finally, we encourage you to think about what type of technical assistance you might be able to provide school districts to really promote the resources we've discussed today, along with tips and support for applying for grants and improving procurement practices. So the last piece of information I wanted to share today is a list of all the federal funding opportunities that can be used right now to promote safe and healthy schools. So these are federal grant dollars. And you can see here, they're available to tackle lead in drinking water, lead poisoning, support safe operations at schools, water infrastructure investments, and energy and renewable energy projects in schools. So if you haven't done so already, really encourage you to check out the resources on this slide. And with that, I just want to thank you all so much for having me here today to discuss this important issue. Tackling environmental health in schools really is a significant opportunity to support student and teacher health and academic performance. So thank you so much for your attention to this issue.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We appreciate you partnering with us and with NASB. And this has been, I think, eye-opening for some of our board members. I'm going to forward your contact information on to our board members, and my hope is that we will take this information to our boards of control, let the Reeses know what resources are out there available. Because I think there are a lot of, particularly in South Georgia, some of the rural districts that don't realize, and it tends to be the rural districts that have the older facilities, that there are grant opportunities out there for them, for testing safe water, for the air quality and that sort of thing. And bringing our partners to, like Caroline, to speak to us, I think will help us understand what's out there for them, and we can take it to our boards of control. Mr. Donaldson.
Can we also get the presentation?
Yeah, is there any way you can email me the PowerPoint, and I'll be sure to send that out to everybody as well.
Absolutely.
Does anybody have any questions while we've got her on the line? Any thoughts? All right, thank you so much. Again, we appreciate you taking time out of your day all the way from the Windy City. So thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
All right, great. Ms. Helen, I know that we had some people that are joining us today, and also I think you had some dates that you wanted to make sure that everybody knew about, some events that we have coming up. I didn't know if you had those dates.
Yeah, I would, you want me to do it after?
Yeah, you can do it whenever, whichever order you want to do it in.
Right now with GPEE, Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education, and so I'll start with that.
Okay.
Most of you know Dana Rickman. She's not a stranger to any of us. She is president of the Georgia Partnership of Excellence in Education, and she is an experienced researcher and dedicated policy expert. And Matt is on the team there, Smith with her at GPE. And you're also familiar with the top 10 issues of 2023 that GPE does across the state every year. So policy and research are some of their most important things that they do in relationship to education and into our community development. But I want to tell you this, that some of you here have already heard because you sit on you're a member of the Get Georgia Reading Cabinet. Well, Dana presented a presentation the CARES Impact Study. And thank you, Richard, and for the DOE for your insight into this, because the CARES Impact Study is a research project to capture how the districts use their federal COVID relief funds. And so when she was going through this, it was so informative, and the outlooks and the research that was done just gave insight into things that were going on in our districts. And I thought this is so important for our state board members to see and hear her presentation. So at this point, I would like to bring on Dr. Dana Rickman and let her bring this research survey to us.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate, Helen, you inviting us here today to share our information, and thank you all for patiently listening and going through some of this. As Helen mentioned, I'm Dana Rickman, president of the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education, and today we're here to talk about our CARES Impact Study and kind of go over what we've been up to for the past 2 years, more or less. And so as a little bit of background, this should come as no surprise to any of you in the room, but this is sort of where we are in terms of the money that has been allocated, and this is a graph of what was going to the districts. A certain percentage of the total was going directly to the districts. And so unlike recurring federal funds, the CARES Act law, though, does give what we're calling the LEAs, the local education agencies, which for us are the local districts, but also state-approved charter schools together as a local LEA. Some broader flexibility to use these ESSER funds in response to problems created or worsened by the pandemic. Generally speaking, the districts have invested these funds in three broad categories: school operations, student learning and well-being, and educator workforce. And so we'll dig into that a little bit for you, but that's sort of the time frame that we're on today and where we are. So about this study in particular, this study we began in the summer of 2021 with support from the Department of Education to conduct it. And the goal of our study is to describe how districts and state-approved charter schools have used the federal pandemic relief funds, identify challenges that local leaders are encountering, elevate promising practices that school systems could adopt, and that's it. But just to let you know that this is a 4-year long-term study, and it's multi-year. We've released an initial baseline report in this time last year, January of 2022, and you have a summary of that report in your folder. And the initial baseline report was just a survey of all the districts about where they plan to spend their money. So sort of their initial plan, especially the big chunk had come down. And then we released a follow-up report this past November, and that's the year 1 report. And that one has a lot more details in it. And so that has come out. We will also, pull data sources from the surveys, interviews, material review, to pull all this information together for you. Oh, and inform state policymakers about local efforts. I thought there was a fourth. And so just a little bit about the method, so you see where all this information is coming from. I already mentioned we did an initial survey in September of 2021 and developed with input from many folks in this room and a lot of our partners across the state to try and glean some information about the district's plans. We had a pretty good response rate, and so that report was also supplemented with material review and sort of some preliminary interviews with how's it going, what were the requirements, things like that. But the more detailed one, last summer, we did a follow-up survey. Again, input, all the things. And so in the more detailed year 1 report, you see a follow-up survey, but then we were also able to interview a cohort of district leaders, 10 districts across the state. And since it's only 10, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a representative sample of all districts, but we tried very hard to get a diverse sample. And so there's big districts, little districts, urban, rural, tried to get a mix of experiences. And so we talked to them and their staff, and also some staff from the Georgia Department of Education about what they're seeing, how it's going, and then especially around challenges and opportunities around implementation. So the year 1 report is a lot more robust than the baseline report because it provides a lot of context into the decisions that districts were making and the challenges that they were having. There we go. So what did we find? Where are we? You can see I kind of tried to smush a bunch of stuff together, but you can see on that left side, the 2019 through 2022, those are the high-level results from the baseline report. The 2022-2023 school year, those are the results from the year 1 report. And what you can see is that generally the districts are spending their ESSER funds and consistently in similar areas. But we do see slight shifts. As one district leader explained to us, while there were some disruptions last year, the LEAs generally were able to move from crisis management mode for that 2020 year, where they were really focusing on trying to figure out how to maintain instructional delivery and keep people safe. Like that was their big focus. And they have now shifted to more of a recovery mode. So they're focusing a lot more on implementing plans to help students recover from learning opportunities that were missed. And so you see a slight shift in sort of the top level categories of where things are being expended on. But again, the 3 main areas currently where districts are focusing are school operations, student learning and well-being, and educator workforce. And so we'll dig into those just a little bit. The first one is school operations. You can see the top areas where districts are investing their money. Specifically, 79% of districts reported spending money on just maintenance of services. 70% reported focusing on renovations like HVAC and upgrading facilities and things of that nature. About 30% talked about spending their funds on fuel cost. And we broke out the data between like rural and non-rural districts, and in the transportation and fuels where we saw some significant differences. So on average, 30% of districts were spending ESSER funds on fuel cost, but 42% of rural districts were targeting fuel. And then again, on average, 22% of all districts were spending their funds on non-fuel transportation cost. But when you pull out the rural districts, that goes up to 31%. So a third of the rural districts were also, so that's just slightly higher than the state average. One thing we did ask them about, because this survey was conducted in September of 2022. So we asked them about inflation. That's when it really started to go up. And did that adjust what they planned to do? And nearly half, 48%, said they were actively adjusting their plans based on inflation. And where we saw most of the adjustments, they were scaling back or completely eliminating things like renovation projects because of materials, supplies, costs, things like that. And they were transitioning that money, a lot of them focusing more on things like rising fuel costs. So we have already started to see some shifting in how they're spending based on inflation alone. So that's the school operations part. Student learning and well-being, there's a couple of subcategories here: increasing instructional staff, summer learning programs, targeted interventions, and fostering student well-being. So first, the focus on increasing instructional staff, which is about nearly 90%, 88% currently responding that they had hired additional staff to address student academic needs. And new positions were added in multiple areas. And if you don't already have copies of these slides, we can make them available to you so you can take time to digest. But you can see the different area priorities of where they were hiring. Certified teachers, academic interventionalists, things of that nature. So that was sort of the spread of who they were hiring. Another area that there was significant investment were summer learning programs. 80% of the respondents were operating summer learning programs in 2022. Of those who were operating programs, 94% were serving students that they had identified as low-performing students to get them into summer learning programs to help accelerate their recovery. What you see here is a list. We asked them, like, what was the most effective component of summer learning? Like, where did they see, the strategies that they felt were most effective, and what did they need? And you see, effective teachers, transportation, curriculum aligned, things of that nature. When we talked to our districts, though, they said the biggest problems that they had with implementing high-quality summer learning programs were recruiting teachers and transportation. Recruiting teachers, obviously, that one, the one for transportation, especially in rural areas, they had, once they enrolled students, they had trouble maintaining student attendance due to difficulties with transportation over the summer, getting them there and getting them home and things of that nature. And you'll see that those are actually the top two priorities that they had in terms of trying to implement and maintain a high quality program. Somewhat related to summer learning, but slightly different, targeted interventions. Really, districts they're all trying to find interventions targeted at the needs of students, individual or in small groups. And there's two primary ways that they're doing this. One, or you think of sort of classic tutoring programs that are often held outside of the normal school day, either in the afternoon or on the weekends, but then also academic interventions, delivered instruction one-on-one in small groups in the classroom, during the school day. So they're using a mix of approaches. About 74% of LEAs are providing tutoring, which is sort of an increase of 66 from the year before. So more and more are providing tutoring. Again, the big barrier, and you'll see the components that they felt were necessary for high quality targeted interventions. Recruiting teachers was a big barrier to do this, and then also transportation for tutoring programs that were outside the normal school day. Same problem as summer. Another challenge that the districts really talked about for in-school interventions was time. They felt their teachers often lacked the time during the school day to compile and analyze the student data, plan the interventions, align with the other teacher, so just the logistics of doing that and having the support staff and academic specialists available to them to navigate that. And so that was one of the things that they were working on getting better. Another area I know that we've all heard and probably seen with our own eyes, the impact of physical and mental health in particular on our students and our staff too in the education system. So fostering student well-being is a very high priority amongst these districts. 77% indicated that they've increased the number of mental and physical health professionals. 56% are talking about providing additional wraparound services to their students and family. And a lot of these are offered through the whole child model that DOE talks about a lot. So these are things like counseling, but also food and clothing assistance, access to health care, really trying to reach out and do partnerships with community to bring in those additional support services. And you can see here when they're hiring new support staff, that slide shows the area in which they've been able to hire to bring on new staff to help meet these needs. And the third area is educator workforce. There are two ways that the districts are thinking about increasing the quality of their education workforce. One is the training of their current workforce, the educator experience, and the other is through recruitment and retention. What you'll see here, 78% of LEAs are spending their ESSER funds on professional development. And so you see these are the areas in which they are investing their funds for professional development. To support professional learning, about 36% have added instructional coaches to provide on-site training and guidance and feedback on instructional practices to their teachers. So they're trying to get more support into the school systems for teachers. In terms of recruitment and retention, we talked a lot about this with district leaders. And so you'll see right here, about 86% of LEAs talked about that they were having a really hard time finding teachers and hiring quality teachers. And so you see there the list of the highest need areas. And I was surprised to see elementary education on that list. Typically that tends to be where we have an oversupply of teachers, typically, relative to other fields. But even in elementary ed, they're having trouble, some districts are having trouble recruiting. And this has created a conundrum for district leaders. They really talked about a lot of LEAs are having to sort of lower their qualifications, and so teachers that they would not have considered good enough to hire for their school system, they're now rethinking and maybe bringing in. And so district leaders and principals are talking about trying to make the decision, do you leave the classroom in the hands of a longtime sub if you can find one, which is not ideal, or do you enter into a contract with a teacher that you don't feel is as qualified as you would like, but it's some stability and maybe you can train them up. These are the kind of decisions that the district and principals or whatnot are dealing with on a daily basis. But I will say it's not just the certified teaching staff. Also on just the education support staff, you see lots of need around education support staff as well. Bus drivers is number one on that one, and that leads into the transportation costs that we talked about earlier as well. But nutrition, paraprofessionals, all of these things are still big needs. And so it's not just a matter of here's a bunch of money, now solve your problems. They have the money, yet they still have obstacles to try and solve a lot of these problems. In terms of financial incentives around recruitment and retention, we saw somewhat of an interesting trend for the baseline survey at the beginning, relative beginning, 2019 and 2020, about 84% of LEAs were providing some sort of retention bonus, sign-on bonus, that kind of thing. But for the current year, for the 2022-23 year, that dropped. 54% of districts are giving bonuses or incentives to certified educators, and only 47% to non-certified staff. So it's still about half, but it's becoming less of a tool that districts are using. Of those who are offering bonuses and incentives, you can see the breakdown there of are they doing a supplement, is it a bonus, and then you can see the amount that they are, the distribution of how much they're giving for those who are offering bonuses and retention. And so I'll wrap up here. There were some common themes that really emerged in the interviews that we did. I should also mention that we had some focus groups with local Board of Education leaders as well. So between the focus groups and our in-depth interviews with the district leaders, some common themes really emerged. And the first one is that most of them are really trying to take a systems approach to teaching and learning, and really trying to figure out how to identify and develop and invest this money in recovery strategies that really support the strategic plan that they already have in place. Or if their strategic plan is up, how does it wrap into their strategic planning, and really trying to avoid just adding programs that are disconnected from what they already plan and the priorities of their community. And so most of them are really trying to shore up this sort of systems approach that you would hope for. A commitment to sustainability. This one's really tough. Everybody's been worried about sustainability since we got the money. We know that the cliff is coming where the money is going to end. And so the districts leaders are keeping that in mind as they plan the programs. They are trying to limit new hire positions to things that they consider essential to their core processes. But as you saw, they are hiring staff across a lot of areas because that is essential to their core processing. And so there's a lot of concern around sustainability. A lot of districts have been trying to plan for it. Most recently, I think probably about a month ago now, the announcement of the increase in the state health benefit plan, many districts are worried that will take up any kind of thought around the sustainability of programs that they're trying to do as they were looking for other sources or whatnot. Most of that is going to be sucked into however they work out the state benefit plan increase. And so just be aware that that's out there as well. There's variations in evaluation capacity. All district leaders and school leaders, they understand the importance of data and really trying to understand if what they're doing is working. But there's wide variability in local districts' capacity to collect quality data, to analyze it, things of that nature, to really understand what's working. And so that's a concern, especially around sustainability and moving forward. Interesting limitations on a shared vision. When the pandemic first began, leaders really described, communicating regularly with their peers in the early months through, convening by different education associations and state agencies, and they found those conversations very helpful, and they liked them a lot. But they said these discussions now have become less helpful on issues of instructional practices and processes. And one of the reasons is some of the more the districts with more capacity have reached out and sought other organizations and resources to help them develop and refine their strategic plan, their processes, internal workings, and they're doing things that other less resourced districts can't replicate because they don't have the ability to go out and get consultants and all these other kinds of things. And so we're seeing a disconnect among districts and their ability to sort of collaborate and shared learnings. Focus on communication as district leaders were making decisions about what to do with the money. Being very transparent and communicating with the community about their plans and expectations has been key. A lot of some of the pushbacks of local districts is parents and community leaders didn't understand why certain decisions were made, and a lot of them didn't understand that this takes a while. And so education, their child's experience of education wasn't going to look radically different 2 months in. And so help to communicate and understand why decisions were made, what the goals are, how long it was going to take has gone a long way to smoothing out some of this. And finally, a big thing that came up was uncertainty on implementation, and I know this board would not be at all surprised by this. The districts expressed a lot of frustration around the allowable expenditures under ESSER. Most of the problem was that USAID didn't release guidance on allowable funds used until ESSER 2 and applied it retroactively to ESSER 1, and so there's a whole thing sorting out. And then a second reason were differing, and I think I remember a board meeting discussion about this, different interpretations around the federal guidance between DOE, which administers the funds, and then the Georgia Department of Audits, who ensures they comply. And so kudos to DOE, who reached out and consulted with the feds and sorted that out. And so I think everybody feels good now, but I think everybody's gotten a little gun shy and I hope this is still okay. And so that confusion delayed a lot of implementation and cost, I think, districts a lot of precious time to get going on what they needed to do. And I just want to underscore these issues really point to the importance of leadership, especially at the district level. There's been significant turnover among superintendents. About 48% of district leaders who were participating in our study were new to the role since 2019. So that's nearly half of folks that were there. We had an additional 28 new superintendents this year alone. And so that kind of churn can really upend, under the best of circumstances, a well-designed improvement plan. And so keep in mind that that's going. And the last thing I'll say, sort of emerging issues that we're going to be digging into in the next round of study. There is an understanding that this is a shared responsibility. This sort of recovery and support for students and educators as well goes beyond just a particular school building or a particular LEA, that this is a group, effort with, community and state working together. Sufficient and effective staffing across all levels still continues to be a problem. Looking at different school staffing models, they're really trying to find different staffing models around how do you include academic interventionists, paraprofessional, graduation coaches, all of these kinds of things, and what are some innovative models that are being done there that may help. Evaluation capacity, we've already touched on a little bit, and how do we shore that up? And then the funding formula. I need to tell you guys about the current QBE, but it's certainly impacted the decisions that districts are making about how to prioritize and where to put these funds. And so thinking about any tweaks that may be done to QBE, not only including can it help with sustainability of things that are working out into the field, but funding around things like technology, student transportation, and accounting for inflation would be an area that would be very helpful to districts as they move forward. The partnership is advocating with a lot of other folks around really looking at a poverty weight tied to the QBE and things like that would be helpful. And so just so you know, our current project, we have 2 more years, and so we'll be doing a new study that we'll put in the field in 2023, and we really want to dig into some of these emerging issues, and so I'll make the offers. There are specific questions that you would like from the districts for us to ask. We'd be happy to talk to you about incorporating that to get some of your questions asked. We're going to continue with our leader interview and focus groups to really flesh some of this out. And I'm happy to announce that we are working on developing a sort of supplemental project with the DOE to really identify and capture some of these promising practices and do some case studies to raise up and share the learnings around which districts are doing really great jobs on addressing learning gaps, student well-being, and then again, the educator workforce. And all 3 of those case studies will keep an eye on recommendations around sustainability and supporting the spread and scale. That's what I got. Thank you. If there's time, I'm happy to do questions. If I'm over time, I'm happy to sit down.
Any questions? Anyone? Mr. Donaldson?
Yes.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your partnership on the study. I'm glad you brought up the sustainability of what has been created. In some of my visits, one of my districts has never had summer school until this funding was available. And I asked the hard question is, what are you going to do after? They said they hope to have summer school, but it's very expensive. And it's a small rural district that just doesn't have the funding to do it. So I am really concerned about the cliff that you mentioned, and everything that's been put in place and all of the great staff that has been hired and put into place with this funding, but what are they going to do? And most districts, especially in rural Georgia, are not going to be able to afford it. So it's probably just going to go away, which is really scary to me. So I don't expect you to have an answer as more of a comment.
There's 2 things about that. I don't have an answer. I wish I did. I think everybody in the room wished they had the answer, but 2 things I'd want to highlight for you. One, the Department of Education created the Boost Grant that's being administered through GSAN, the Georgia Statewide After School Network. And it's, Matt, you're right, millions of dollars. And they are really building out sort of a network of summer and after school, like a whole structure. And so separate from this work, one of the things we're advocating for on the state level is around how after the boost money goes away or the federal money goes away, how do you sustain the network that they have built? Because they're really looking at quality improvements and, sustainability and really training local folks on how to do this. And I know that rural is a particular focus for them. And so, but this would be something that would have to then transition to the state to help support. And so, but the infrastructure is being built to help do that. And in terms of the cliff, it's my understanding the DOE is talking to the feds, trying to figure out a way to sort of do a no-cost extension as we go through this. And so hopefully that will help the bluntness of we could roll off easier, but they'll be able to tell you more about the possibility of that and where those discussions are.
I do hope it gets extended, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Martha?
Yeah, okay, so I have several questions, but I think they kind of cluster in groups. So you kind of touched on as far as the ongoing spending, because I'm thinking about staff, what's gonna happen with that next. Recruiting and retaining, if they know it's being funded with temporary money. And then the incentive kind of thing, is that a function, you saw a big drop off on the incentives. Is that a function of the fact this isn't permanent money, do you think? And I know all those are three questions, but they're all about a lack of permanence in the money.
This is not a research-based answer. This is from discussions, quality-based answer, but I think there were a lot of incentives right away because everybody was afraid that there would be mass quitting and couldn't blame them, of the instructor, of the educator workforce. That didn't happen. And so the immediate panic around, oh my gosh, we have to keep and also, we've had a series of raises for teachers from the state level and how that's been incorporated. So I think between the two, and then the third part of that is that they're really not able to find what they want to hire, so they just didn't offer incentives because people weren't applying that they wanted to hire. And so a couple of reasons around that, why that came down, that it just wasn't a useful tool. But still half were. But for the ones that weren't, they're like, it just wasn't the thing that got us the candidate that we were looking for.
Well, and to your point, I think that if I remember correctly, and again, it's kind of a fog because the beginning of that was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But I do think there was some people that went ahead and retired.
Yeah.
So the fear of that was, oh, we're gonna have a bunch of people leave too. But then my second question is, you mentioned about the superintendent turnover. Do you know what it normally is? What is an average term for superintendent?
18 months?
18
months to 3 years? Generally 18, but yeah.
Three, okay.
Less
So
than
there's
3.
a lot of turnover anyway.
Yes,
Okay.
there is always a lot of turnover.
So it may be causation without correlation kind of thing.
Mhm.
Okay. But
Yeah.
it's an interesting point, and I can see that. And I know I have in my district, I have, both situations. I have situations like Hall County where the superintendent's been around forever. And then in my smaller counties, which is probably where you see more turnover, because they're moving up the ladder, to the bigger counties. So that's probably what happened.
Well, and for us,
Thank
from a policy standpoint, the implications of that are what kind of policies or practices need to be in place that support superintendents, to give them the resources to sort of stabilize that so they feel that they have what they need to effectively govern. But then also state structures around how do we train and support principals as well, because that turnover is pretty high too. And so thinking about long-term, I know this is a priority of the department, around training and sustainability of our leaders that are in the schools and in the districts.
Well, and I mean, this is more a statement than a question, but bad times, while they create their own problems, they generally expose problems that were already there more than they create new ones. Maybe the pandemic was a little bit different in that regard, but I think the teacher retention problem was there before we had the pandemic. Some of the things we're talking about were there before we had the pandemic. And so, I think to this whole larger discussion about professional training for teachers, treating it more like a profession, treating every level of education more like a profession is really something that was happening before the pandemic. But the pandemic is kind of like when the lake level goes down. I live near Lake Lanier. It's like all those trees are always there and all that stuff that's under there, it's always there, but you don't see it until the lake is way down. And that's kind of what
I would agree. I don't think the pandemic actually caused any new problems particularly. It just made the ones we had more acute and much harder to address and more urgent.
Is it fair to say, though, in what was presented to Get Georgia Reading and this too, that transportation was a big thing that was talked about, but also, the student learning needs, and that's why the summer after-school programs came in and the tutorials came in, and that 77% or 78% on literacy. What are we gonna do to help kids read and function? So all of these things, I guess, I mean, they culminate, that's right, but when you start reviewing this with this study, and then I heard you say that the DOE has commissioned y'all again to look into best practices that came out of some of this.
We're working that out
So
currently.
that will be a key thing to really make sure that we understand the specific things that are needed, but I agree with Matt, we gotta have the sustainability in there too for those districts of what they need to do to get the job done.
Any other questions? Yes?
It is, one, Matt and Martha and Helen, y'all are correct. I mean, got up and Mike talked about 8 years and Scott talked about 10 and Helen and I are now finished 12 on 13 and we were talking about teacher retention 13 years ago. So, but to that, the teacher retention and recruitment, are you seeing, particularly now with the increase in healthcare systems, talking about utilizing outside services, i.e. staffing services, and increasing in that to fill those gaps, particularly, I mean, parapros and different things that maybe.
You know, I'm not sure. I think this discussion is they may be, but I have not heard that. But this is sort of a recent look what's coming that I think most of the districts are trying to work through it now to see. And there's been different proposals that maybe they'll roll it out over 3 years or, whatever, but it's still, even over 3 years, it's a big chunk. And so I have you heard of any discussions like that, Matt? No, we have not heard of that.
Stan, at Yale, there was a slide that someone presented on teacher retention. The guy was talking about how do we encourage our teachers to say, and there was a slide there that a majority of our teachers are saying right now they would not encourage their children to go into education. So we've got to this is a profession, as Martha was saying earlier. We had this discussion, and you go into it because it's a profession and you're doing something that is really constructive and dedicated to kids. So, and I know, I really didn't feel like they really meant that, because as a teacher, you would want, but you've got a child that's a teacher, Mike.
I know, well, too, and talking to and hearing from them when they're around and some of the discussions I've had with teachers and people that have been leaving lately that are friends of mine that I graduated with in profession and leaving. I mean, a lot of it now, and it's gonna be near and dear to our new board members' heart, is safety, security, and discipline. I mean, those aren't new, but those are becoming, I think, in our surveys we're gonna be seeing, because I see it, going to be rising up the list of why teachers are not returning or not encouraging. I mean, there's a multitude of reasons, but discipline and security are the two that I've been hearing over and over and over lately.
You gotta do something to make sure they stay because they're important.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much.
I want to comment just on Mr. Royal's comment about safety and security. We're not focusing just on active shooter assessments, that we're focusing on what's actually taking place in the classroom. Dealing with children who are coming out of trauma situations from within the communities, drugs, gangs, violence that they are exposed to. That's coming into the classroom and into the school building.
And that's really what I'm talking about.
Yes, so we can't just focus on active shooter assessments. We've got to focus on the root cause
It's
of what's.
the day-to-day that doesn't make the news.
Right.
Good point.
I just want to thank Dr. Rickman for being here today, and Georgia Partnership never disappoints with their presentation and their research. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Sweet.
Yeah, I think your presentation was amazing, and one of the things that we always get into this money discussion, money solves a lot of problems, and it can solve a lot of problems. And I'm wondering, like in your studies, learning about the appetite of local LEAs to essentially increase funding, because what's been happening is that the state is obviously, the governor has increased salaries and so forth, and yet that's almost immediately offset by the increase in the state health benefit plan costs and so forth. And it's like, we're just trying to catch up and, you know, it can't always be reliant on government to come in. And I know that at the local level, it's always a tough discussion with regard to, you know, increasing funds. You know, those are decisions by local boards and so forth. And it also depends on the, I'll call it the microeconomic climate of a particular area and its tax base. But what are you hearing about, you know, the propensity to look at that as well?
Well, I would say that I agree that just throwing money at the problem is not any kind of solution, and just generally saying we need more money is not at all the solution. What I'm hopeful for and what districts are hopeful for is to use this money in this time period to really demonstrate what does it actually cost to get the results that we're looking for. Like, what did it really cost us to accelerate kids back up to grade level? You know, here's what we did, and we were able to move, and here was the price tag for that. And then sort of equate that to, okay, what are we actually getting? And so what I'm hopeful for over the next now remaining 2 years is to get a real sense of, if we're going to ask for more money, why and what for? And where does it need, you know, we talked about an opportunity weight for low-income districts. Do we need to weight up like K-3 grades for, you know, intensive reading and give a little more money there, and really thinking about, if we're asking for more money, why, and tied to a purposeful outcome. And I think in that regard, then you'll kind of see the results of, if you spend more money, you'll actually get better outcomes, as opposed to just, you need to give everybody more money. I don't think that would change anything. But tied to a strategic plan that's sort of proven to, here's where we want to go, here's how we're going to get there.
The other question I have is, what incentives do you think are going to be required to, and it may just be financial, I get that part, but what other incentives is it going to take to get more people to enter into the teacher pipeline?
It's a little bit financial. Certainly, everybody wants to be able to make a good, you know, wage for themselves and their family. So that's a part of it. But we've already touched on it a little bit earlier, that it's really the professionalization of the profession, and really thinking about, and Georgia's made some strides around things like teacher leaders. And so to provide a career ladder that allows teachers to stay in the classroom, but feel like they're still advancing their career. And thinking about teacher leaders, and, you know, are they mentors to other teachers and all these other kinds of things, and that they're actually part of the decision-making processes of the curriculum and the instruction in the school, and that they're not just, here's a book, teach it for 20 years, right? That's not, and so, you know, for all of us in our profession, we want to feel meaningful growth. And so how do we provide that for teachers to keep them excited about their meaningful growth? And then that's tied to having leaders in the building, back to the principals, of understanding how to use those teacher leaders, and how to, and so it's not just, unfortunately, it's all connected and very complicated, but the basic structures around how we train and teach, and the expectations around the teachers and the leaders, that they are instructional partners, and that they have a path to grow in their career, and not just the same kindergarten instruction for 30 years. That's a big part of it as well, and how they are respected and their voice is heard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We appreciate that, and great conversation. We'll keep the conversation flowing. Ms. Helen, do we have some more guests that
Well, we
wanted
have
to
a couple
speak?
of things that are coming up. Dyslexia Day at the Capitol is coming up on February the 21st, and we have our dyslexia group right here, and they've been working very hard to promote this. If you're here in town, come by. Tina, you want to say anything?
Excuse me, a little froggy this morning. Good morning, and thank you. We will be at the Capitol from 9 to 1 on Tuesday, the 21st, and we have secured room 230 in the Capitol, and we welcome all of you to come over if you're in the area and available. We're going to be having a lot of kids from various schools joining us this year, thank goodness, because we really have a lot of fun showing them the Capitol, helping them meet our legislators, and having them share their stories with the legislative body. So we will be in room 230, and then we'll be wearing our big blue badges. So if you do stop by, come and say hi to the kids, because they're very excited when they get to do this. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you.
And then I think we have Dr. Buck in the back, and I think her conference is coming up, GASIS, February the 27th and 28th in Savannah. Do you want to give a shout out?
Thank you so much. We do have our GASIS Winter Conference coming up at the end of February in Savannah. The focus is going to be on literacy. We have some excellent national keynote speakers coming in to speak on literacy as well as dyslexia. We have our friends from the DOE that are going to be there with us doing some presentations and updates. And this is our largest winter GASIS conference to date. So we're very excited about that event in Savannah. Hope you can be there.
All right, and one other thing is our Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning is just going to give us some highlights of the great meetings that have been coming up. She says we're almost there, and she's doing a great job. And is there anything else coming up that you know, April, with
Anything else in the teaching and learning world?
No.
Nothing.
Any other dates? Any other dates coming up?
We do have a date. I'll give you a quick update, and then maybe that'll cover all the dates. It's been a minute since I was able to speak to you all and give you an update. I think the last time I was here was in December, so there has been a lot of hard work, and as Helen referenced yesterday, it has been in the forms of lots of teacher leaders from the classroom level, the school building level, the district level, and our RESA partnerships, and it has entailed a lot of chart paper. It has entailed a lot of sticky notes. It has entailed a lot of conversation and collaboration, and certainly really digging in and focusing on and working with the public comment and feedback that we received during the time when the first draft was posted for review and comment. 7 days have been dedicated since January the 3rd. Today's only February the 16th. So a lot of hard work. We've been going back and forth between Atlanta and Warner Robins, trying to be mindful of our educators that we are incorporating into this process. Each session we've had about 40 or more in each session, and it's been a pretty stable group that they've been coming back and forth. So what have we been doing during that time? We've really been taking that feedback, and we've been focused on alignment and structure. We've also been mindful of developmental appropriateness. Certainly we've been working on clarity, terminology, accessible language for all of our stakeholders, and certainly we've been focused on one of the things that came back in the public feedback was some of the concern about the amount of standards and the amount of information to cover. So we've been very mindful of that too. So I can't stand up here and speak to you without really recognizing the team of folks who is making this work happen. Certainly we're being led by our ELA team, Dr. Breanne Houston and her team, also hand in hand with the assessment team. We could not have done this work without them. They have been instrumental in helping us to really look at some of the alignment and structure areas that we wanted to focus on. And certainly we've been working with Jennifer Lindstrom and her expertise in the area of dyslexia, a big part of our focus with our K-5 foundations. Our domains will stay the same at this point. We're still focused on the K-5 area and foundations, and K-12, we're focused on language practices and text. Probably one of the most notable updates that has happened, other than the amount of work that has gone on between the first draft and what we hope to have to you very soon. Somebody asked me the other day when we thought it would happen, and I said, well, if it was up to me, it would have been yesterday. But the truth is, you can't put a timeline on the right work, and we are committed to being authentic and genuine and really paying attention to the feedback and the research and the evidence that is necessary to ensure that these standards are the right right standards and that they are standards that will transcend certainly the years ahead, but will also be open, ensuring education for all of our students, no matter what their outcome is when they leave us from high school. There's lots of different pathways they can take, and we want a set of standards that meets the needs of all of those students. So what we did announce at the end of, I guess it was toward the end of January, and this again was based on public feedback, is we revisited the timeline, and originally we were going to implement our ELA standards the year 2024 to 2025. We did make the decision to move that to 2025 to 2026, and that was probably just a collective sigh of relief for our teachers, to be honest, because we're looking at implementing our mathematics standards in 2023, 2024. So what this does, it gives us time, because once we get the standards done, there's a next level of work that has to happen, and that is an essential part of this, and that is professional learning, that is the development of resources and support, so that as we move into full implementation, that we will make sure that we hit that mark in just the right way so that we provide the best opportunities for our students. So we will now implement in 2025, 2026, especially helpful for our elementary teachers. Many of them will be teaching math and ELA, and so we want to give our teachers time, again, to be masters at what they're working on, and I think that at the end of the day, the folks who benefit the most will be our students. And at the end of the day, I say this every time, that is what we're all about. So I'm happy to answer some questions, but that's a high-level overview. We will be back together next Wednesday, February the 22nd. Our Educator Working Committee will be in Warner Robins, and we will be moving toward the next layer of that work. And when those standards are ready, we will bring those to you for your review and then your action to take on those being posted and then finally adopted, hopefully sooner, not later.
That's great. You did mention Dr. Lindstrom.
Yes, she's been working hand in hand with us.
With the dyslexia and the screeners. We had a conversation with Ms. Taylor about the screeners that have come in for the request for information.
Mm-hmm.
And so just a question, I don't know if we have the answer yet, but I think Dr. Lindstrom has, the next session is coming up virtually for the
Right, with the task force,
right?
Correct.
And so we were tasked as that force to look into these screeners and to come up with some kind of timeline, because our districts are wanting to know when they're gonna get the selection. Is there still any information on that to come yet?
So the timeline for the RFI for the list of dyslexia screeners, those vendors have submitted those screening requests. We'll post together a list along with the ELA standards, make sure that the ELA work and the dyslexia work is aligned. We'll provide that list of screeners to the board for your approval.
All right, thanks, great job, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Roy, would you have-
That just jarred my memory, and not today, put anybody on the spot, maybe for even next month, on the teacher evaluation pilot. Got some questions on that from across the street. We could possibly get an update on where we are with that, how that's going, because that's obviously a huge, ties all this together. Not for today, but this all pulls together, maybe even part of the report next month.
Do that in March, get an updated report. Any other thoughts, comments? On a final note, we honored Scott and Mike as board members, and there was a song many years ago that quoted Ecclesiastes, "To everything turn, turn, turn." And so as we honor two board members, we welcome two new board members, and one has not been officially sworn in yet and will be joining us in March. But we have a new board member, and we joined him yesterday. It was a very special moment in the governor's office as he officially got sworn in, got to participate in our committee meetings and, most importantly, executive session yesterday.
Oh, fun one too.
Trial by fire. But we
Yeah.
want to welcome Nick Ellis to the board.
Yeah.
Nick is from the 1st Congressional District. He is from Jessup, Wayne County, where he served on the Wayne County Board of Education for a number of years, and comes from a law enforcement background, so brings a unique perspective. And I spoke with Nick last night, and it's interesting because you can find out, by and large, everyone on this board what their passion is very early on. And we're passionate about public education, obviously. We're serving on the Board of Public Education, but we all have our little things that are personally important to us. It's very obvious. For Nick, it's about school safety, and rightly so. And we had a conversation last night, and Nick has some wonderful ideas that in the coming months, I hope that we can expand upon. But Nick, I just want to give you a moment to say hey to everybody and tell them a little bit about yourself that I haven't already, and kind of what your thoughts are about now that you've been through a meeting.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me, Mr. Chairman. I'm Nick Ellis from the 1st Congressional District. I served with the Jessup Police Department. I am the Administrative and Patrol Commander for the department, and I oversee about 19 guys and also municipal court. Outside of that, I work for our hospital and our sheriff's office doing off-duty security details and coordinating all special events for Wayne County. So anything that happens major in Wayne County, I'm involved in, making sure that we have officers and EMS, fire, and all of the emergency services there to help in case there is some type of crisis or situation that we experience. I have spent some time on the local Board of Education, 8 years. I chaired that board for 7.5, and then that time came to an end. During that time, I also served as the school safety coordinator, really kind of enhancing the school resource opportunities that we could not afford at one time, but through a number of conversations with city and county commissioners, we were finally able to get on the same team and enhance that and really kind of grow those officers in those capacities. And so school safety is a very, very big part of my life. Not only, again, I said, we don't just focus on active shooter. I'm a gang expert. I also served on a drug task force and spent some time, understanding how kids are roped into the drug and gang culture. It disrupts what's happening in our public education. And so I do a lot of combating and working with our regional task forces to help, keep kids from getting caught in those environments. And really trying to keep them on our sports teams and plugged into our CTAE programs and in an academic focus for their success. So, well, I'm excited about being here. Yesterday was very eventful. First executive session.
Ain't seen nothing yet.
But it's a lot of information to learn, and I'm really excited about working with you all and looking forward to learning more. I got a lot of work to do. I cannot feel Mr. Mike Long's shoes. I cannot dance.
Well, they dance, there is that.
But I have had the opportunity to work with him on a lot of different community things that we've done. One of the things that me and him have spent some time working together on is supporting our local Boys and Girls Club. I'm a very big advocate for the Boys and Girls Club. Our area, Autumn Hall area, does a great job of supporting our school system. And so I believe in keeping that partnership and really helping that club continue to provide services for our kids in an after-school setting. So we did get to work together on some of those projects, and certainly look forward to our continued friendship. And thank you for all that you've done for the 1st Congressional District, and I'll keep it moving forward.
Right, well, thank you. We welcome you to the team, and you are a welcome addition. We appreciate what you bring to the board. One of the unique things about the Board of Education, and I've said this before, but we represent each of the 14 congressional districts. And so we all look different, we all act different, and we come from different parts of the state. We bring different backgrounds, different unique skill sets. And that's exciting and encouraging. So I'm excited about that and the work that Nick will bring to the board in the coming years.
And I will add to that, I did spend some time with the Georgia School Boards Association. I was a district director for 4 years with them. And so I really believe in the work that they're doing, taking what this board creates and implements into state board rule, and, really transitioning that, those things into, training and education to help our local board members enhance their practices and services.
Thank you for that. All right, anybody else have any final thoughts? This time I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'm
No,
sorry.
No, we do
I
have
am-
some final thoughts.
I am married to Crystal Ellis.
Oh, you-
No, yeah, we can't, here we go,
Good
here we go.
save,
You
good
were about to be in
save.
trouble. It was about to be a long drive back to Jessup.
Which one of these,
All right, go
which one of
ahead.
these two ladies
Lisa-
remind?
Lisa got it.
So I have 3 kids, a senior, junior, and a 3rd grader. 2 boys and 1 girl, and we just concluded our senior basketball season. It's been a long ride, lots of summers on the road, but you know, I told my wife, I said, thank God it's over. So we're looking forward to graduation, and he has expressed that if he, you know, has the opportunity to play in college, he will. If he doesn't, he's going to college because he wants to just go to school and not have to do all that. So,
That's great. Thank you. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn at this time.
So moved.
Thank you, sir. Second, all right, any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? If we
Aye.
are.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.
Great. Yeah, it's been a long drive.
Yep.
I'm sure she was.
Then it hadn't slept in her.